Hi folks, so those of you who watch my channel know that I do my full moon videos about 48 to 72 hours, 48 hours before the full moon. This full moon on May the 13th is a full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo. And tomorrow, starting May the 6th, we come to about a week before that eclipse. After the March 13th, sorry I said May, March 13th. After the March 13th eclipse, we have a solar eclipse in Aries on March the 29th. And a week after that takes us to about April the 6th. So I would say that March the 6th to April the 6th is sort of what I will call this kind of 30 days of eclipses. And with the full moon lunar eclipse, I'm aware that I'm saying certain things that I'm trying to get the basic stuff and my housekeeping done in the first 5 to 7 minutes of this video so we can really dive into. So just be patient with me as I go through that process. But it's going to go all over the place. So those of you who've been watching my videos, keep watching, because I don't know what I'm going to share. I'm prepared for this video, but you know that anyway, let me stop making qualifications. Let's keep going. 2 months before a lunar eclipse, the week before and after January the 13th, some people can experience the eclipse then. Some people can get strong developments or messages related to the eclipse then. Eclipses whenever eclipses happens, they're not the only eclipse in that cycle. The eclipses on the Virgo-Pisces axis, the North Node eclipses in Pisces, the South Node eclipses in Virgo, the eclipses on the Virgo-Pisces axis, in my opinion, started to exercise their influence in the middle of July of 2024 and will continue to exert their influence till February of 2027. There are 7 eclipses total on the Virgo-Pisces axis. 4 of them are in Virgo, 3 of them in Pisces. All the eclipses in Pisces are full moon lunar eclipses. And one of the eclipses in Virgo later this year is a solar eclipse. All the other eclipses are lunar eclipses. This is heavily a cycle of completion in the same way that the eclipse cycle just before this, which is still current because on March 29th, we have a solar eclipse in Aries. The Aries-Libra eclipses were overwhelmingly solar eclipses, and they had an expansiveness to them, a sort of coming out in the light. Whereas the Pisces-Virgo eclipses very much have a sense of what is done, what is complete, what do we need to release, feel to them. What do we need to settle? What do we need to manage? What do we need to stabilize? What do we need to... There's a kind of a sense of... there are things, there's a lot hanging in the balance, and there's a feeling of a necessity to take action to complete things before they get completely out of hand so that you can move forward. And we've still got a solar eclipse in Aries exercising its influence till the end of the first week of June of this year. So we on the Virgo-Pisces axis, the only set of eclipses together, typically there are 2 eclipses back to back. We're going to have the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse that occur later this year in September. We're going to have the solar eclipse in Virgo and the lunar eclipse in Pisces. They're going to be, both the eclipses are going to belong to the same axis. Even as early as the beginning of 26, we're going to have a lunar eclipse in Virgo, but the solar eclipse will actually be in Aquarius. So we'll start to switch onto the Aquarius-Leo axis as early as the beginning of 2026. This is part of the reason why I've been saying to you that the Pisces part of the chart is the most important part of the chart, partly because Saturn and Neptune exit Pisces by February 26, and the heart of the eclipse cycle on the Pisces Virgo axis is really sort of the center of gravity. Like when a top is rotating and there's that center sort of occurs around the August-September timeframe for us of this year. Now, we still have eclipses on the Virgo-Pisces axis in 26 and in February 27. So it continues in that direction. Now, this is going to sound like an abrupt transition, but it isn't quite. There are 3 ways to, this is the housekeeping part, avail of my services. You can watch my videos for free. You can become a member. I just started memberships about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I have just done my first set of sign-specific videos. In my opinion, for rising signs, those are the ones that you should watch for your ascendant. You can watch them for your sun, moon, Venus if you like, but that I'm going to leave up to you. You need to watch the one for your rising sign if you know what it is. And the next set of videos I'm going to do there are going to be related to this Virgo full moon lunar eclipse. But the reason why I kind of felt prompted to, and then the third way to avail of my services, of course, is to have a reading with me. And you can, if you're interested in that, you can contact me by using the email address in the description box below. And also information on how to become a member is in the description box below. And I can give you information. I'm running 2 specials right now of 30 to 40 minute reading centered around one topic for $50 and a 60 to 75 minute reading for $100 on the astrology of March and April, the eclipses and Mercury and Venus retrograde. Okay. That's the housekeeping bit. Part of the reason why I kind of went directly from what I was saying before to the housekeeping is because I'm going to do the full moon lunar eclipse videos in Virgo, but they build on the new moon in Pisces videos that I just completed for rising sign. And for those of you who are not members and are watching the free content I put out there, make sure that you have seen my new moon in Pisces video. Because, as I've said numerous times, Pisces is the most important, the part of your chart occupied by the sign of Pisces, the house occupied by Pisces, is the most important part of the chart in 2025. You have Saturn and Neptune trying to close out their transits by February 26. And even though the North Node eclipses in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo will continue to exercise their influence all the way to February 27, it's going to be starting the middle of the year that the North Node eclipses are going to clear Saturn and Neptune's influence and are really going to start to make their presence felt. We're going to have different elements of closure. And in the month of March and April, months of March and April of 2025, that new moon solar eclipse, that new moon, forgive me, in Pisces, even though it is not an eclipse, with the fact that you have a new moon followed by 2 eclipses, Mercury and Venus going retrograde between Aries and Pisces, the new moon in Pisces we had a little over a week ago may as well have been an eclipse. And the eclipses, the new set of eclipses that we're continuing to move towards right now are very much on that Pisces-Virgo axis. The North Node is in Pisces, even though we have one more North Node solar eclipse in Aries on March the 29th. And those Pisces videos, whether it is the general new moon in Pisces video I put out on this channel as part of my free content, or whether it is the sign-specific ones in the membership part of the chart, provide the basis and the foundation, not only for March and April, but also certainly for the rest of this year till February 26, and even to some extent for February 27, because I touched on how Saturn, Neptune, and the North Node eclipses would typically exercise their influence in the part of the chart occupied by Pisces, the house occupied by Pisces. Now, why have I said that? I've said that because a new moon occurs and opens up a 28-day month related to the sign in which the new moon occurs. So on February the 27th, we had a new moon in Pisces, and we started the month of Pisces, the word month being derived from moon, which takes us to March 29th, where we will have a new moon in Aries, which happens to be a solar eclipse, and we will open up a month of Aries. That'll take us to roughly April the 27th or so, when we have the new moon in Taurus, and so on. 14 days after the new moon occurs, the moon, which is expanding in visibility and in intensity, the moon becomes full. It's as if on the new moon, a wave starts to move towards the shore. It gathers more and more momentum, and around at the time of the full moon, it crashes on the shore. And then for another 2 weeks, it starts to pull back. As we start this process after the 6th and the 7th, and the moon goes from becoming half full to more and more full every day, intensity will increase. And everything about the astrology of next week suggests that this coming week is critical. Critical. Because as we approach the full moon lunar eclipse, sorry, I'm just getting my facts out and it's coming up here. As we approach the full moon lunar eclipse, we have next week, on the 12th, the Sun conjuncting Saturn. On the 13th, the full moon lunar eclipse. And as we head to the 17th, the Sun conjuncts the North Node. And as we get to the 19th, the Sun conjuncts Neptune. Now, Venus and Mercury have already made their first round of conjunctions with all these bodies. Venus and Mercury, when they are retrograde in the beginning of April, Venus will conjunct Saturn twice. Mercury will conjunct Neptune and the North Node. And Venus, of course, will also be conjuncting Neptune in the North Node when she reverses back. So a lot of that energy, but a lot of the energy, March is one of those months where it feels like nothing is happening. But I have to tell you, March is the hangman, and April is, as I mentioned earlier to you, the death card in the tarot. Where the transformation occurs. So it is a little bit as if in March things it is in March that action needs to be taken. And even if it feels like the real shakeup and the real resolutions and the real transformation occurs in April, all of that is dependent on what we're doing in March. And you have an opportunity between now and the full moon lunar eclipse, and indeed till about the 20th of this month, as the sun makes these conjunctions. But most importantly, out of all of these conjunctions, the most important conjunction is the sun conjuncting Saturn. The full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo on March the 13th opposes Saturn, practically to the degree. One day before the eclipse, the sun conjuncts Saturn, the sun moves ahead by 1 degree, and the full moon happens. And that full moon is opposing not only the sun, but also Saturn. And Saturn's transit through Pisces is the most important transit of this year. 25 till February 27, till February 26. And you have an opportunity as you head towards the 13th to try and get as many of your ducks in a row, to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart as much as possible, to take responsible, disciplined action towards either fulfilling professional, ambitious plans in the Pisces part of the chart, or taking responsible action, disciplined action to quell any irresponsibility or messiness or an inability to structure and stabilize the Pisces part of the chart since 2012, but especially since 14-15, and most especially since 16-17, 2014, 15, 16, 17. Or if you've been dealing with themes of deception, or you've been playing your cards close to your chest, someone else has been lost through deception, cunning, gaslighting, murky behavior, then a need to set boundaries, but with Saturn also to contemplate cause and effect, lessons learned. What do we need to take away with regard to how we need to act in the most mature, wise, intelligent, strategic way? And it's possible that even though we may not be the perpetrators of deception, it's possible that we could have, by being reactive, which is perfectly human, made situations worse. And Saturn is very much about cause and effect. Saturn is very much about responsible action. Saturn is very much about processing lessons and learning lessons. And no matter who is at fault, Saturn will say, let's examine your part in this. Think about what you have done to make the situation worse, whether by not having boundaries in place, or by reacting in ways that has kind of led to this becoming an already problematic set of behaviors becoming even more problematic. With Saturn, there's always this effort that Saturn imposes towards mastery. But it also ages you. You learn things. Saturn is basically saying, how can we stop acting like a teenager and start acting like an adult? And that means that if you have ambitions, or if you have not been able to handle things in a disciplined and responsible way, or if you've been dealing with murky behavior, or you are doing things in a murky manner, trying to kind of put something under the carpet, then Saturn is basically saying, let us process the lessons around all of this and start to clean up our act. And as I've said before, stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. When the full moon happens 2 weeks after a new moon, and if the sequence is the new moon is happening in one sign and the full moon is happening in the opposite sign, sometimes a full moon happens in one sign and the new moon happens in the opposite sign. At present, the new moon is happening first, and 2 weeks later, the full moon that happens is actually happening in the sign opposite the new moon. New moon in Pisces, full moon, lunar eclipse in Virgo. Houses that are opposite each other are part of each other. It's like looking at a ball that is divided into yin and yang, but it's one whole. The first house is me. The second house is the important people in my life. The second house is my emotional financial independence. The 8th house is emotional financial codependency. The third house is mental communication and verbal communication and community. The 9th house is my kind of hermetic connection to spirit and higher communication. The 4th house is my private life, home, land, real estate. The 10th house is my public life and my career and my reputation. The 5th house is me as a solo player, a solo performer, my joy, my pursuit of happiness. The 11th house is friends, networks, social circles. It still has a public component to it. And me as part of a group, not as a solo player, as an ensemble, as a part of a group of friends, but also, rather than my joy, in the 11th house, we are doing things for the collective good. The 6th house is the busiest and most productive part of the chart, executing my responsibilities, taking care of my job, taking care of my health. The 12th house is the least busy part of the chart, releasing, processing lessons, reflecting, isolation. It's all one theme. So when a new moon happens in one part of the chart and full moon happens in the opposite part of the chart, matters related to where the new moon has happened and where during the month created by that new moon we're taking action invites some sort of an emotional or intuitive reaction from the opposite factor, from the opposite part of the chart. So if you have the new moon occurring in your first house, then the full moon that happened, and you are pursuing goals related to yourself, your identity, your business card, what goes on that business card. The 7th house may produce, the full moon in the 7th house 2 months later may produce some sort of a reaction. It can be positive because the full moons can bring visibility, culminations, completions. It can bring a contract if we're talking about the 1st and the 7th house. But the full moons can also bring a meltdown. So a critical partner, a critical contract can express frustration or displeasure at whatever it is that is being built from a self-motivated perspective during the month created by the new moon. So the new moon occurs in Pisces. From the Virgo part of the chart, there is some sort of a reaction, either positive, visibility, completion. And it's temporary when it comes to just a full moon. So visibility in the 11th house could mean that all of a sudden, or in the 3rd house could mean that all of a sudden, from a social media perspective, you post something that gets a lot of attention for about 72 hours. That kind of thing. That's full moons. With eclipses, we're going to get to the eclipse part of it. Because this full moon is related to the Sun conjuncting Saturn in Pisces. Let me just finish that thought. A full moon in Virgo could also be that whoever or whatever is happening in the Virgo part of the chart could have a very strong flare-up or reaction, a desire to protect, expressing displeasure, expressing alarm, expressing concern, matters related to the Virgo part of the chart as efforts are expended in the Pisces part of the chart. Now, this theme I'm going to develop more when I do the rising sign videos, because we're going to talk about specific houses there. And I'm sure anybody who understands astrology knows this. I can't go into what this will mean in each and every house here, or we will be here for another 2 hours. But if you know, and many of you do, which house is occupied by Pisces in your chart, the full moon is happening in the opposite house. And I have already, a few minutes ago, given you a brief summary of all the houses and how reactions may occur. I actually stopped with the 6th house. If the new moon occurs in the 7th house, it could be you having a reaction to partnerships and contracts. New moon happens in the 8th house. It could be you having a reaction with the full moon with regard to protecting your own emotional and financial independence, or reaping the reward of some stability because you have taken responsible action in stabilizing financial or emotional, but especially financial expectations or codependencies, money owed, inheritance legacy issues. If the new moon happens in the 9th house, there could be a flare-up or a reaction or a visibility with regard to you needing to pay attention to your immediate community and environment. If the new moon happens in the 10th house, and the month of Pisces is a career month, planting seeds, the full moon in the 4th house could bring your attention temporarily to domestic matters. If the new moon happens in the 11th house, the full moon could be a flare-up related to what you love to do. You're needing to pay attention to yourself in a month that is devoted to being part of a collective, or spending time and attention with friends, or spending time towards philanthropic activities that benefit the collective. If the new moon happens in the 12th house, then the full moon in the 6th could just mean that when the full moon happens, you find yourself for that 72-hour period very, very busy executing on responsibilities and obligations, or dealing with health issues. Okay, so you get the sense. I have given you kind of a summary to kind of think about, where does the new moon happen, requiring you to put in 28 days of work and effort, building on, in this case, Venus and Mercury's transits through the Pisces part of the chart, and taking action to stabilize, disciplined, responsible action, in this case especially because of Saturn's involvement in Pisces, transit through Pisces, and in bringing the Pisces part of the chart into alignment with what you value. And I'm going to say that much, because if you want more on that, watch the new moon and Pisces video. Otherwise, again, we'll be here for 2 hours, and I'm going to repeat all that. But while you're doing that, as the moon grows, and over the next week, the moon will grow and grow and grow. As you head to the full moon, you might find yourself becoming more and more productive. But that productivity can sometimes lack a certain stability and can kind of get us worked up in a full moon way. I've always said that the most productive week out of the 4 weeks that the new moon creates is the week after the full moon. The full moon is still full, we have our energy, but everything is not escalating. But for the next week or so, things will escalate, and they demand and need attention, and I will talk about why in a second. They demand and need attention. It may become unwieldy and kind of chaotic as you get to the full moon, but the energy is still one of productivity. Now, the full moon is a reaction and opposes the Sun and Saturn. Saturn is asking you to act responsibly and in a disciplined manner to create a strong foundation, to eliminate energy leaks, to dispel with chaos, to set boundaries where they need to be set with others or even with yourself. And Saturn would almost say, first set the boundaries with yourself, and then you'll be able to set the boundaries with others. And the boundaries with ourselves, let's say our boundaries with others are weak. The boundaries with ourselves would be make setting boundaries with others a priority. What is it that prevents us from setting boundaries with others that are effective? Saturn is all about integrity, cause and effect. If the impulse behind an action is not clean, Saturn wants you to act towards your highest potential, to be the best version of yourself. And Saturn is all about the lessons, discipline, routines, behaviors, structures that enable that. The Sun and Saturn meeting is your very soul, the solar part of yourself, your internal connection to Source, and Saturn having a communication. But it also means when the Sun is following Mercury and Venus. Now, Mercury and Venus will retrograde, and they will also follow the Sun. We're not done with activities in the Pisces part of the chart till April. As I said, in April, on the one hand, it will seem like structures that seem fragile may not completely disband. But while it might seem like nothing is happening, we are taking action. We have to be taking action. And the structures change, morph, collapse, create an opportunity for the new, and what needs to be ended in April, when Venus and Mercury both retrograde back into Pisces. Mercury goes direct first, Venus goes direct next. And a lot of that is dependent on this next week. There's a lot hanging in the balance. And there's an element of needing to face the music because of Saturn's involvement. It would not surprise me at all if you are aware at this point and you feel like there's urgent need for stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart over the next week. And if you feel that, take action around it, please. Taking action when the Sun is getting ready to conjunct Saturn may feel terrifying, but it's very much around those. If you have a deadline, it doesn't just always have to be around negative things. If Pisces sits in your second house and you're an Aquarius rising and you are working towards getting tenure in a university and you have 3 deadlines and you have administrative responsibilities and you're dealing with self-worth issues and Saturn is saying, structure your time, make this happen, meet the deadlines. As I've said to you, the astrology of February, but especially March and April, is very clearly the status quo cannot hold. Transformation needs to occur. And this could be transformation that we have desired in 2023 and in 2024. And the time is now, and action needs to be taken. But the most urgent action that needs to be taken is to ensure that anything that you feel is built on a pillar of sand or needs attention or needs responsible and disciplined attention from your side, it is time to show up, have those conversations, show up in a way that expresses your desire to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. And then it's very possible and likely that you will be rewarded with a path forward. It may not be easy, and you might encounter in March and April a Saturnian figure. Let's say that you are aware that you have missed a deadline and you are in, this is the time to show up and knock on the appropriate party's door and say, look, I'm really sorry I missed this deadline. This is what's going on. Let's talk about what I need to do to get back on track, etc. That is responsible, and commit to making the changes that you need to make. Now, you might not be doing this because you're kind of not willing to face the music because you know that the other party might be severe. You might know that the consequences are high. You might know that you need to give them more of an answer or explanations than you may be. But by not doing it, it is possible that the other party, if they don't hear from you, if you don't communicate with them, just decides that they're going to fail you, or they're going to... With Saturn, in the mix, the consequence is not pretty and pleasant. There's a lot hanging in the balance. Now, you may be faced with an uncomfortable situation, but the fact that you are acting and coming from a place of integrity and responsibility will give you tremendous power to handle whatever it is that is thrown at you. Because if people see that you are at a place where you're willing to start to handle things in a manner that can move towards resolution, then it can change the outcome. So whatever it is that is, and some of this could even be your own desires to, if Saturn going over Pisces is helping you structure Neptunian goals around the arts or music or things that you kind of get by connecting to the muses, things that come to you from the dreamscape, but therapeutic activities, healing, helping the collective, monastic, spiritual, renunciatory goals, all of that, putting some structure around it, structure around practices that deepen your connection with Source by kind of erasing the egoic, pursuing the creative. You may have certain ambitions. This would be a great week to take responsible action to start to, or continue to, give them a solid foundation and move them towards success and create a solid business plan and take the next right action, as opposed to it remaining in kind of a cloudy dream space. So you could be facing deadlines, you could be facing ultimatums at this point in time. Everything in the astrology would suggest that. And the Sun getting ready to conjunct Saturn, then the North Node, then Neptune, means that there is a real energy of reckoning in March. But there's also the ability to show up and start to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. From the Virgo part of the chart, by the time you get to the full moon, as long as you're in action now, you could experience a sense of, oh, I made it. I have put some stability around matters related to the Virgo part of the chart so that they are not affected dramatically by the chaos in the Pisces part of the chart. But it will take you showing up between now and that full moon lunar eclipse over the next week. And indeed, between now and that energy will continue till about March the 20th, as said, the Sun gets ready to conjunct Neptune, to the time for action to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart and be open to creating, and therefore be opening the doors and windows to move towards the new or desired direction in the Aries part of your chart, whether solar eclipse is going to happen on March the 29th, between the 29th of March and the end of the first week of June, is now. It's not in April. It's now. If you don't, and you have things hanging in the balance, and there are notices due, or there's something coming up, you could be in a situation by the full moon, it is opposing Saturn. It could be a face-off where all of a sudden someone does something and you have to go into frantic defense mode. Because that Saturnian body or personality or person or situation is saying, no, I'm not going to pass you. No, you're not going to graduate. No, I am going to impose this fine or this penalty. We have sent you 5 notices. Where have you been? And with Neptune going over Pisces, handling matters related to responsible action since 2012, but especially peaking 14, 15, 16, 17, or you have to be a little careful. You may find that when it comes to the full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces, if you're dealing with kind of deception or deceptive issues and boundaries have not been set by you, that you have to frantically go into place to go ahead and set those boundaries. Whereas if you get into a place where you're getting clear about things over the next week and a half, you may find with that full moon lunar eclipse that in Virgo that you have managed things so that there isn't a loss being created. The other aspect related to this full moon is that it trines Uranus in Taurus. There's enough support here also. Eclipses are either north node eclipses or south node eclipses. South node eclipses are eclipses where something needs to be released. Something has served its purpose. Something is starting to become like an overripe fruit. Something is an area of comfort, a status quo set of behaviors, attachments, or something physical. And it needs to be released. The last time we had eclipses like this, North Node eclipses in the Pisces part of the chart, Virgo eclipses in the, the South Node eclipses in the Virgo part of the chart was between 2005, 6, 7, 8, with kind of 2007 being an important year. Typically, eclipses repeat themselves with about 17 years. I'm checking something. Yep. No, 2006, 7, and 8. Not 2005. 2005, we did not have any eclipses on the Virgo-Pisces axis. 2006, we had 3 of them. 2007, we had eclipses on the... So it takes us back there. It's interesting to contemplate what was happening there. And for those of you who are members, you can tie that to what I'm going to be saying and what we're going to be building on with the more rising sign videos that would apply to you with regard to the houses where this is occurring. But I've also in this given you a sense of, if you know which house Pisces is in, you know which house Virgo is in. And I've already given you kind of an important summary of that in this video as well. Something needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart. Something is completed. Something that if you continue to stay in it is going to lead to loss. You're leaning into the Pisces part of the chart and the Aries part of the chart to get something. And as I said, the releasing can be, it's very much around being attached to something that there's nothing there anymore. And it will just, so you've got to ponder what, and remember, this is an important eclipse because of the opposition to Saturn, no question. But this is only the second of 7 eclipses on the Virgo-Pisces axis. And this is the first of 3 full moon lunar eclipses in Virgo. So typically it's one eclipse in the entire cycle that really carries, that really feels like an eclipse, like not just a chapter is ending, as I've said, like a book is ending in a 19th century novel. A book that has 25 chapters, and then another book has, and there are 18 books, and it's not a chapter ending, it's a whole, there's something to be gained by leaning into the Pisces part of the chart with the North Node eclipses and something to be released. Right now, I find it very interesting and very appropriate that the Pisces new moon was not an eclipse, because it's as if the Pisces new moon is saying there's greater emphasis on Saturn stabilizing the Neptunian element in the Pisces part of the chart as opposed to you leaning into the North Node in Pisces quality of actually getting something from that part of the chart by leaning into that part of the chart. Now, as I said, some of you may have gotten important clues about what needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart the week before and after January the 13th. Some of you may complete that release now, some of you may have completed that release, and some of you may just be clocking what needs to be released and feel like, oh, it's not yet time. You may release it a year from now. You may release it around another Virgo eclipse or another Pisces full moon lunar eclipse. Because this is not the only eclipse that we're having in Virgo. Eclipses also, and this time period between March the 6th and April the 6th may make us very keenly aware of this world and the next world, whether it is our own mortality, but especially other people's mortality. News about illnesses or conditions that could have people passing on. It just feels like, I've never done the research on whether there's a greater frequency of people transitioning or dying. You know, it just feels like all of a sudden there's just more about that during these kind of eclipsy periods. The trine to Uranus is fascinating. Something needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart that allows you to move in the direction that is right for you in the Taurus part of the chart. Remember, we're stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart and cleaning up past issues. But the future right now is beckoning to us in the Aries part of the chart with the North Node solar eclipse in Aries on March the 29th, which some people will feel May 29th, week before, week after, to the end of the first week of June. The future is symbolized by Uranus in Taurus, moving in the right direction for us in the Taurus part of the chart. What is right for us? It does not have to be the conventional path. And by Jupiter being in Gemini till the end of the first week of June, creating an ending and a new beginning, ending a 12-13 year cycle, starting a 12-13 year cycle. The Pisces new moon occurred, setting up a 4-week period of urgent action to bring the Pisces part of the chart into alignment so that Jupiter can continue his work, ending a 12-13 year cycle and creating an auspicious and aligned new beginning in the Gemini part of the chart. The full moon lunar eclipse on the 13th speaks directly to Uranus. What needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart that will allow you to move in the direction that is right for you in the Taurus part of the chart? And then the new moon that occurs, solar eclipse on March the 29th, is in the Aries part of the chart. All three of these lunations look to the three houses that embody where we want to move forward in the future state we want to create, and where a sense of spontaneity and joy and adventure and forward movement is, while honoring that the Pisces part of the chart has to be stabilized. And work on the Pisces part of the chart continues not only in March, but also in April. In April, we have the month of Aries created by the new moon in Aries on March the 29th. But a massive amount of astrological activity continues in the Pisces part of the chart. Venus and Mercury come into Pisces. And Mars in Cancer, now direct, makes his most important aspects, trining Saturn, trining the North Node, trining Neptune, opposing Pluto in April. April is when the transformation occurs. April is when we reach resolutions. Over the next week, I can't say this enough, my darlings, over the next week, you must initiate responsible, disciplined action, either towards building something or towards managing a certain kind of looseness and irresponsibility in the Pisces part of the chart, or managing consequences of deceptive behavior, creating loss for yourself or others, depending on who's being deceptive. Saturn and some of the astrology points to the fact that that Saturn will teach you lessons around your own shadiness as well, or playing cards close to the chest. Saturn wants things to be out in the open and wants there to be definition and wants boundaries to be set. But if you're the one who is not setting the boundaries and you're on the receiving end on some deception, Saturn will teach you lessons around you're not having strict boundaries. Don't assume that Saturn will come in and create justice for you. Saturn will say, are you going to stand up and create justice for yourself? If not, then these are the painful lessons that you need to learn. Action taken now to manage the Pisces part of the chart means that by the time we get to the full moon lunar eclipse on the 13th, we either experience the reward of starting the process of stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart because the Virgo part of the chart is therefore less vulnerable, or else we see challenging, alarming, in certain cases, really stressful consequences in the Virgo part of the chart because we have not shown up responsibly to handle and manage the Pisces part of the chart. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be dramatic and alarmed, but I will not be doing my job. We cannot mess with Saturn. The beautiful thing is that encoded into this full moon are a couple of wonderful transits. Trining Uranus. What needs to be released, completed in the Virgo part of the chart that can allow you to move in the right direction in the Uranus part of the chart. Here's this dependency again. Stabilize the Pisces part of the chart, and moving in the desired direction in the Aries, Taurus, and Gemini part of the chart will be easier. Don't stabilize the Pisces part of the chart and get threatened to just flood everything. Also encoded into this full moon are two aspects that Mars is making. Mars is now direct, and Mars is getting ready to square Chiron in Aries, where the new moon solar eclipse takes place. And Mars is getting ready to trine Saturn. From the Cancer part of the chart, action needs to be taken, pursuing certain goals and setting boundaries. Managing conflict, but also pursuing goals. Mars is the ability for us to pursue our ambitions or goals wherever he is transiting. And in doing that, there's an urgency and an importance to do it so that the work that Chiron has been doing in Aries to help us heal, become whole, become empowered, to become complete. The idea with Chiron being that something happened in our childhood or in our teenage years that separated us from ourselves, our authenticity, our power. And Chiron comes in and heals that painfully, but he heals it. He tries to put us back together again, to take us back to that more unconditioned space that we were born in, where we were in our power before other people started to mess with it. And we did not have, and we in the process of being conditioned may not have had our defenses in place. So Mars is saying, I am moving forward now, getting ready to give Saturn support to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. But in the process, the Mars trining Saturn occurs in April and will be encoded not only into this full moon lunar eclipse, but also into the new moon solar eclipse on March the 29th. And in fact, will be stronger in the full moon, in the new moon solar eclipse on March the 29th. But Mars squaring Chiron, action needing to be taken from the Cancer part of the chart, pursuing goals in the house occupied by Cancer, or managing conflict and competition, or setting boundaries, protecting what you value, but also going towards and building what you value. Hunting, gathering, harvesting. That action is necessary and becomes urgent because it allows Chiron to heal you and empower you in the house occupied by Aries. And I find it really lovely that amongst all the aspects that Mars is making, three of them being overwhelmingly positive, the trines to Saturn and Neptune in the North Node, one of them being very much an agent of powerful change that takes us back to January 20th to February 20th, 2024. Mars conjuncted Pluto on February the 14th of 2024. Mars opposes Pluto for the third and the last time of three on April the 26th. That in the middle of all of these, Mars also squares Chiron, as if to say the action I'm going to take, I recognize, needs to be empowered. It needs to come from and facilitate a certain healing in the Aries part of the chart. But this full moon lunar eclipse, as terrifying as it is, because of its proximity, its opposition to Saturn, has two gorgeous trines embedded into it. The full moon itself trines Uranus, which is also trining the South Node in Virgo, where something needs to be released. And Mars is moving towards, is within a 5-degree orb of trining Saturn. All the support is there. The sooner, and I would say within the next couple of days, remember the moon is in Pisces. No, the moon is not in Pisces right now. The moon is not in Pisces right now. It's so weird. It has that feeling. Well, partly it has that feeling because we are motivated to be in action over the next 48 to 72 hours. I would not even wait that long. Over the next 24 hours, even more than that, up to 48 hours, take the action you need to take to start to show up responsibly, either to structure your Pisces plans or to stabilize it, or to start to move towards setting boundaries, or to correct your own behavior if it has been nebulous or Neptunian in sort of not being completely clean. Start that process and continue that process to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. It's a very critical time between now and the full moon in Virgo. And if we continue to talk about the week after the full moon being the most productive time, that energy continues as the sun moves to conjunct the North Node and conjunct Neptune on the 19th. If you take action to start to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart now, over the next week, and then 10 days, but especially over the next week, especially over the next 24 to 48 hours, you might find that the universe says, all right, if you're showing up, we'll start to work with you. And you might find that by the time you get to the full moon lunar eclipse, two things are happening. Number one, the Virgo part of the chart feels more protected, although there may be an understanding of how the Virgo part of the chart is affected by whatever you're doing to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. And this coming week and the week after the Virgo full moon lunar eclipse, you may become very clear about what needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart. That is done and has served its purpose. And I will expand more on that in the sign-specific videos. But if you know where Pisces and Virgo sit in your chart, I've already given you highlights of what direction to look at. The thing that I'm not crazy about with this full moon is that the ruling planet of Virgo, Mercury, is stationary. When I said there are things that are hanging in the balance, I mean it, because you will take a certain amount of action over the next week and you may get, and part of the reason why I'm saying do it now, do it this week, because Mercury is still moving forward and is still direct. By the time you get to Saturday, Sunday, Mercury pauses. And what may happen is that if you take action now and meet the other party or the other situation, between this Saturday, Sunday, and during the time that Mercury and Venus are actually retrograde and retrograde back into Pisces, and then go direct, and Mercury goes direct in Pisces and on April the 6th or 7th and clears Pisces by the 14th, and Venus goes direct April the 13th and clears Pisces by the end of April. Whatever it is that is being presented or discussed may go through a period of examination and review. And that's going to come with its own challenges, and that's going to come with its own fears. Because when Venus is getting ready to go retrograde in the 2nd and 3rd week of April, that is going to be a little bit like, okay, what we're proposing, what does Saturn have to say about it? We don't reach the resolutions till the last couple of weeks, till the 3rd week of April. But do the work now. Show up responsibly. Show up to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. Show up with every intention to be done with the status quo and move towards the direction that the future is beckoning in the Aries, Taurus, and Gemini part of the chart. Work moment by moment. Don't get overwhelmed by how much needs to be done to get to that place. Just work step by step by step. And pay attention right now to anything that shows up from a communication perspective that has that sense of, if I don't attend to it, crap will hit the fan. Proactively get in front of situations over the next 48 to 72 hours, even in the next 24 hours. Because all this work you're doing because it will continue to bear fruit, but be in examination till at least the end of the 3rd week of April. But it's critically important to participate in, when a car is starting to roll down the hill and it's still really slow and there's a chance for you to open the front door and get in the driver's seat and press the brakes or do what you need to do, you manage to be a participant in that momentum. So take control of it. And this full moon lunar eclipse will then give you part of the result or the impact of what it means. Things will be stabler and more protected if you're in control, or else if you're not, then something could occur as you're headed to this full moon lunar eclipse opposing Saturn that feels that much more stressful to manage. But there's a couple of, whatever from an eclipse perspective needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart allows you to move in the right direction for you in the Taurus part of the chart. And Mars is really, it's not moving. The next video I'm going to do in 2 days' time is going to be about Mars being direct. And I've avoided doing it, even though Mars went direct on February the 23rd or so. Mars has been pretty stationary. He's only now starting to gather some momentum. Mars squares Chiron exactly on the 26th of March. But he's within about 2 degrees of Chiron, I think, something like that. It's just that he's moving really slowly right now. So it's time to start talking about Mars. It's time for action. You have a lot of support for action, my friends. And think about the full moon as both a full moon in Virgo and as an eclipse of release. Okay, there's a lot of information that I've put in here. There's a lot to ponder, a lot to think about. But yeah, I hope you found this useful and helpful, and more to follow. We will take it from there. Information on memberships, contacting me for a reading is in the description box below. Information on donations is there. You can use the thanks button underneath this video to contribute to the channel. You can contribute to the channel for free by liking this video, commenting on the video. It gives it greater circulation on YouTube. If you find this content useful, you think others will benefit from it, by all means, spread the word. Share the video to, or information about the channel. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And when you subscribe, it'll give you these kinds of options with, there's a wiggly bell option on top so that you're notified whenever I do new videos. You'll be notified whenever the videos are published. And yeah, I think that's about it. I will leave it at that, and more to follow. I just feel like anything that I say right now is just going to be like, get in action and be disciplined and set your boundaries and process your learnings and start to establish. I've already said it. All right, take care.